She's turned Prince Harry into a man of non-substance. It just struck me as like completely empty.
It began with a warning delivered in only a few carefully chosen words. Tom Bower was preparing to speak again, and this time, insiders feared his revelations would reach far beyond Meghan's public image, reopening private decisions, disputed stories, and palace conflicts she believed had been buried forever. The announcement was calm, almost restrained, but that only made it more dangerous. Bower did not shout. He did not reveal names, dates, or documents. He simply suggested that significant new material had emerged, material connected to Meghan, Harry, and the decisions that shaped their final years inside the royal world and their controversial life beyond it. There were hints of private conversations that had never been reported, accounts that had shifted over time, warnings delivered behind closed doors, choices made during moments when the Sussexes' relationship with the monarchy was already beginning to fracture. Yet Bower stopped before revealing the substance, leaving only enough detail to ignite suspicion. That uncertainty became the real threat. Meghan's advisors could challenge an accusation. They could dispute a date, question a witness, or attack the credibility of a document. But they could not prepare for everything at once. Was Bower returning to the royal wedding, the treatment of palace staff, the departure from Britain? A private request made to the Queen, Charles, or William? Every possibility carried its own danger. In public, Meghan remained composed. There was no immediate statement, no emotional response, no sign that the warning had reached her. But privately, the pressure began to grow. Silence could allow Bower's version to dominate the conversation. A rushed denial, however, might expose exactly which subject she feared most. Harry soon understood that this was not merely another attack on his wife. Any investigation into their departure could uncover disagreements between them, promises made during tense family discussions, or decisions he had defended without ever revealing the full story. The threat was no longer aimed at Meghan alone. It was moving toward the foundations of the life they had built together. Then came the palace silence. Senior aides offered no defense. No official challenged Bower's language. Buckingham Palace appeared willing to let the announcement hang unanswered, creating the unsettling impression that those inside the institution already knew what he intended to reveal. For Meghan, the timing could hardly have been worse. Every project, interview, and public appearance depended on her ability to shape her own identity. Yet Bower was suggesting that the past was not one forgotten scandal, but a pattern linking staff disputes, royal traditions, divided loyalties, and the couple's life after Britain. And then the first rumor emerged. Someone once considered safely beyond Meghan's inner circle had reportedly spoken. But while Meghan's team tried to identify the possible source, a deeper question began spreading behind closed doors. How much had Tom Bower truly uncovered, and who had finally decided to help him? Meghan had survived criticism from commentators, former employees, distant relatives, and royal observers. But this threat felt different. The information was reportedly coming from someone who had watched events unfold at close range, someone who understood which public explanations concealed deeper arguments, private fears, and irreversible betrayals. Her advisors began examining every word of Bower's announcement. The timing, the phrases he had chosen, the years he appeared ready to revisit. Nothing seemed accidental. His language pointed toward more than one event, and that made the search for his source almost impossible. Was it a former palace employee who had witnessed the tension before official statements softened the truth? A publishing contact who had seen private accounts change during negotiations? An advisor involved in the couple's final royal discussions? Perhaps it was someone present during a family meeting. Or a person who worked with Meghan after she and Harry had already begun building their new life abroad. Each possibility carried a different threat. A hostile commentator could repeat gossip. An insider could explain what happened before the public story was prepared. They could describe Meghan's first reaction, Harry's doubts, the arguments that followed, and the intentions hidden behind carefully polished words. That was what made this danger so difficult to contain. People Meghan had once trusted now returned to her mind. Old messages that had seemed harmless. Private calls made during moments of panic. Meetings that had been forgotten because everyone involved appeared loyal. Suddenly, every conversation felt capable of becoming part of a larger timeline. Her suspicions soon reached Harry's royal connections. Which former aides still felt loyalty toward him? Which individuals believed the Sussexes had unfairly damaged the institution? And who might have decided that protecting the crown mattered more than protecting Harry? For him, the search reopened an old wound. Harry had long believed palace systems defended the monarchy first and the people inside it second. Now he feared someone from that world had stepped forward, not simply to expose Meghan, but to correct what they considered a distorted version of history. The most troubling possibility was that the source was not acting out of revenge. They may have convinced themselves that silence was the greater betrayal. In their eyes, the public had heard interviews, accusations, and emotional recollections, but never the complete sequence behind them. And Bauer was reportedly not relying on one voice. He was comparing accounts, rebuilding dates, and searching for moments where later explanations failed to match what witnesses remembered. Separately, the incidents appeared survivable: an argument over protocol, a private request, a staff departure, a painful family dispute. Together, they could suggest a pattern. At the center of it all was one hidden moment, a private warning delivered before the royal exit, followed by a decision Meghan allegedly made without fully informing everyone whose future it would change. That warning had remained hidden beneath years of interviews and accusations, but as Bauer's investigation moved closer to it, Harry realized the next revelation could challenge not only Meghan's story, but his own. Harry had spent years defending the choices that carried him away from royal life. Yet Bauer's announcement placed him in an impossible position. To defend Meghan, he might have to reveal conversations he had sworn to keep private. To remain silent, he risked allowing another man to define their history. For the first time, Harry was forced to look beyond the public arguments and confront the gaps between what he remembered, what Meghan had told him, and what Bauer might be preparing to expose. The question was no longer whether the palace had failed them. It was whether crucial decisions had been moving forward before Harry fully understood their direction. The final months of royal life had been filled with exhaustion and suspicion. Every headline felt hostile. Every meeting seemed loaded with conditions. Advisors offered competing solutions, while trust inside the family collapsed. Harry believed he was fighting for security, dignity, and protection for his wife and child. Meghan, however, was also fighting for independence, control over her identity, and the freedom to shape a future beyond palace permission. Those goals were connected, but they were not identical. According to the growing whispers, a private warning had been delivered during this tense period. Senior royal figures allegedly made clear that commercial freedom, public royal status, and official duty could not exist together without limits. The monarchy demanded hierarchy, discipline, and loyalty to the institution. The Sussexes appeared to want the power of royal recognition without surrendering control over their future. Harry remembered those conversations as desperate attempts to reach a compromise. Meghan may have remembered them as pressure. What he heard as caution, she may have heard as a threat designed to keep her trapped. Then another possibility emerged. Meghan may already have been receiving advice from people outside the palace. People who understood media strategy, future projects, international relocation, and the value of making an announcement before the institution could control it. Harry may not have known every detail. That did not prove deception. But it created a devastating question. Had he helped build the complete plan, or had he been slowly brought into decisions that were already taking shape? He resisted confronting Meghan. Asking too directly could reopen wounds they had spent years defending together. Yet avoiding the subject carried its own danger. Bower might soon reveal the answer publicly, leaving Harry to discover private history at the same moment as the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the palace prepared in silence. Old correspondence was reviewed. Former aides were warned not to speculate. Senior royals understood that even one careless reaction could confirm more than it denied. Then, Bower narrowed his language. His next disclosure, he suggested, would involve a concealed plan, a private royal warning, and the moment Harry realized events had progressed further than he had been told. Then came the detail Meghan had feared most. Bower was no longer promising general disclosures, he was preparing to reveal the alleged plan, the warning that challenged it, and the secret that left Harry exposed. When Tom Bower finally revealed the core of his investigation, the story changed instantly. According to his explosive account, Meghan had explored a future beyond royal control earlier than publicly understood, and a direct palace warning had been issued before Harry realized how far those private plans had already progressed. The claim was devastating, because it did not simply suggest that Meghan had once imagined leaving royal life. It suggested that parts of a future beyond the monarchy were already being explored, while negotiations about her official role were still taking place. According to Bower's account, outside advisors had entered the picture earlier than many believed. These were people who understood entertainment, publishing, international media, branding, and philanthropy. They could see what Meghan's royal identity might become without palace restrictions. Not a former duchess fading quietly into private life, but a global figure able to shape her own message, choose her own partnerships, and build influence beyond Britain. For Meghan, those discussions may have felt like protection. Inside the palace, she felt increasingly trapped by rules she could not change and decisions she could not control. Preparing another path may not have seemed like betrayal. It may have seemed like survival, a safety net for herself, Harry, and their family if the institution refused to move. But the palace allegedly saw something else. A senior royal figure reportedly warned Meghan that titles, official duty, financial freedom, and private commercial ambition could not be combined without consequences. The monarchy was not a platform that could be entered and left while its prestige remained untouched. Eventually, she would have to decide which identity came first. That warning changed the meaning of everything that followed. If Bower could support his timeline, critics would argue that the Sussexes' departure was not simply a sudden escape from unbearable pressure. They would claim it was the result of careful planning that had begun before Harry and the wider family understood how permanent Meghan's intentions had become. Harry now faced the most painful possibility of all. Some discussions may have moved forward before he knew their full scope. His loyalty to Meghan collided with a terrible fear. Had he surrendered his royal future without understanding every part of the strategy? Then came a second claim. Meghan allegedly wanted assurances concerning security, status, financial independence, and continued access to royal prestige after stepping back. To her, these demands may have represented fairness. To palace officials, they challenged the monarchy's oldest rule: privilege followed service, not personal desire. Buckingham Palace offered no denial. Its silence only intensified the storm. Meghan's advisors divided immediately. Some demanded a forceful rejection. Others warned that a detailed response might invite Bower to release evidence he had deliberately kept hidden. And Bower was not finished. He suggested the departure plan was only the beginning. The next disclosures would examine how Meghan allegedly tried to preserve influence within the royal structure after rejecting its authority. The revelation had finally explained Meghan's fear, but the deeper scandal was still forming. Because leaving the monarchy was one thing, attempting to keep its power, privileges, and symbolic inheritance was another entirely. The monarchy could survive a departure. What it could not tolerate was a rival version of royalty operating beyond its control. Bower's next claims pushed directly into that forbidden territory. Exposing the alleged battle over titles, security, inheritance, commercial identity, and privileges Meghan believed her family had earned. The conflict was no longer about why Meghan and Harry left. It was about what they believed they should be allowed to keep. Public status, international influence, royal associations, family security, ceremonial recognition, and the freedom to build private ventures while remaining connected to one of the most powerful institutions in the world. To Meghan, these were not unreasonable demands. She and Harry had global appeal, charitable influence, and a name that carried enormous value far beyond palace walls. She believed that gave them leverage. The palace saw danger. Royal privilege had always been tied to service. A title could survive on paper, but official representation, institutional protection, public funding, and ceremonial authority came with conditions. The crown demanded discipline. It expected its members to place the monarchy above personal ambition. Senior advisors reportedly feared that allowing the Sussexes to create a partially independent royal role would establish a dangerous model. They could benefit from the crown's prestige while rejecting its restrictions. In time, the couple might appear less like former working royals and more like a second court, one with its own message, commercial interests, and international audience. Harry viewed the matter differently. He believed his birthright should protect his family whether or not he remained inside the working institution. Security did not feel like a privilege to him. It felt like an inheritance shaped by childhood trauma, relentless media attention, and the loss of his mother. That pain made compromise harder. Bower allegedly claimed that Meghan pressed for clearer guarantees before the separation became final. She wanted certainty about titles, the children's future place, public appearances, protection, and the couple's freedom to build a platform abroad. She may have seen these requests as basic protection against being erased. Royal officials reportedly interpreted them as something far more threatening. Then the argument moved beyond money and status. It entered the territory of symbolic inheritance, Diana's memory, family ceremonies, private history, royal archives, and Harry's emotional authority as the son of a future king and a beloved princess. According to the alleged account, Meghan was warned during a sharp private exchange that royal heritage could not be separated from royal obligation. Walking away would not only change official duties, it would eventually change access, influence, and belonging. That warning now carried greater force. Bower's disclosures could push the palace to turn unwritten limits into permanent boundaries, leaving Meghan connected to royalty by history but excluded from its inner power. And as those boundaries hardened, another conflict moved into the open: the private struggle over Diana's memory, Harry's loyalty, and Meghan's place within a legacy the palace would never allow her to control alone. No subject could wound Harry more deeply than Diana. No royal legacy carried greater emotional power. And according to the growing revelations, the battle surrounding Meghan was never only about protocol or money, it was also about who could speak through Diana's memory, inherit her influence, and define what her suffering meant. For Harry, protecting Meghan had always been tied to protecting the past. He believed he had already watched one woman he loved suffer beneath relentless attention, royal pressure, and institutional silence. Allowing Meghan to face the same forces without resistance would feel like repeating the tragedy he had spent his adult life trying to understand. That belief gave every conflict greater emotional weight, Meghan's struggles were repeatedly connected to Diana's through themes of isolation, hostile headlines, restricted freedom, and a palace that seemed to value stability more than personal pain. The comparison became more than a family memory. It became the moral foundation of Harry's rebellion. Bower's alleged argument pushed into that sensitive territory. By presenting Meghan's experience through Diana's history, the Sussexes gained powerful emotional authority. Anyone challenging their account risked appearing indifferent to the lessons of the past. Inside royal circles, however, the comparison reportedly caused deep resentment. Diana was not simply a symbol to them. She was a complicated mother, former wife, and member of a wounded family. Senior royals resisted the suggestion that every disagreement involving Meghan was proof that history had returned unchanged. William's silence carried particular force. Diana had been his mother too. Yet where Harry believed speaking publicly honored her suffering, William appeared to believe that repeated references exposed grief that belonged to both brothers. To him, Diana's memory could not become permanent ammunition in a modern royal conflict. That difference created a rivalry neither man could easily escape. Bower's material allegedly pointed to a disagreement involving a Diana tribute, charitable connection, public statement, or commemorative event Meghan hoped to influence. She reportedly felt entitled to participate because Diana's experience had shaped Harry's fears and, through him, Meghan's own royal journey. But the palace drew a distinction. Harry could carry his mother's memory personally. That did not give Meghan authority over ceremonies, archives, jewels, or the official story surrounding Diana's place in royal history. The refusal cut deeply. Meghan believed the institution celebrated Diana when convenient while resisting comparisons that raised uncomfortable questions. Harry, meanwhile, feared that losing access meant losing his voice in how his mother would be remembered. Then, Bower hinted that the dispute had triggered direct intervention from a senior royal. The response was controlled, formal, and final, but Meghan allegedly experienced it as a calculated humiliation. That intervention transformed an argument about memory into a confrontation about rank, authority, and belonging, and it would reveal which royal figure was prepared to draw the final line against Meghan. For years, Meghan believed the palace operated through vague warnings and anonymous briefings. But Bower's revelations point toward something far more personal. A senior royal allegedly stepped forward, rejected a private request, and made it clear that Meghan's influence would never extend beyond the limits imposed by the crown. This was the moment the monarchy allegedly stopped trying to manage the conflict as a family dispute and began treating it as an institutional threat. Emotion gave way to structure. Private sympathy, if any remained, was pushed aside by one question: who had the authority to speak for the crown? At first, the identity of the royal behind the intervention remained uncertain. Some suspected Charles, determined to protect the monarchy during a fragile period. Others looked toward Camilla, whose position depended on discipline and public stability. Princess Anne also seemed possible, given her deep loyalty to hierarchy and duty. But Bower's account allegedly pointed toward William. As heir, William was no longer free to see the Sussex conflict only as a broken relationship between brothers. He had to consider the future of the institution. The palace could not allow confusion over who represented the monarchy, who controlled royal ceremonies, or who could use private family access to strengthen an independent public platform. From William's perspective, the line was necessary. It was not revenge. It was duty. Meghan reportedly saw it very differently. To her, William's resistance confirmed a fear she had carried for years, that her independence had never been treated as strength, only as danger. She believed she had entered the monarchy with energy, influence, and global appeal. Yet the institution had responded by limiting her role rather than recognizing her value. Harry felt the refusal as another personal betrayal. Once again, his brother appeared to choose the crown over compassion. The future king was protecting boundaries, while Harry believed his family was being pushed further outside them. The disputed request allegedly involved some form of royal recognition or access, perhaps participation in a family occasion, influence over a Diana tribute, a role in a future milestone, or a private attempt at reconciliation. Whatever its exact form, the response came quietly through official channels. There was no public confrontation, no dramatic argument, just a formal refusal that left no room for negotiation. That silence made the message even colder. For Meghan, Bower's revelations now threatened to explain more than the past. They suggested why every effort to preserve royal relevance had met an invisible wall. She remained connected through Harry, through her children, and through history. But she was no longer permitted to shape the monarchy's public identity. And Bower still held one final detail: Meghan's alleged private reaction after the rejection. The palace had drawn its line, William had refused to move it, and Harry stood trapped between two worlds, but Bower's final disclosure threatened to reveal what Meghan said when she realized the royal door might truly remain closed. With the revelations spreading and the palace refusing to defend her, Meghan faces one final choice: remain silent and let Bower's version harden into history, or launch a counterattack powerful enough to reopen every royal wound. But whichever path she chooses, Harry may be the one who loses most. Behind closed doors, 3 responses were reportedly considered. The first was a direct denial, clear, forceful, and immediate. The second was a carefully controlled interview in which Meghan could explain her motives in her own words. The third was silence, allowing the storm to pass without giving Bower more attention. Yet every path carried danger. A detailed denial could invite documents, witnesses, or timelines Bower had not yet released. An interview might create fresh contradictions and drag private family conversations back into public view. Silence, meanwhile, could be interpreted as weakness or as proof that the central allegations were too dangerous to challenge. Meghan's private reaction was said to be far more emotional than her public composure suggested. Anger mixed with fear. Betrayal hardened into determination. She believed critics were rebuilding her history without acknowledging the pressure, loneliness, and sense of exclusion that had shaped her decisions. Then came Bower's final alleged disclosure. After the royal refusal, Meghan reportedly told someone close to the couple that the monarchy would one day regret underestimating the reach of her voice. To supporters, those words could sound like the declaration of a wounded woman refusing to disappear. To critics, they might suggest that reconciliation had always mattered less than influence, control, and vindication. For Harry, the consequences were unbearable. Defending Meghan without hesitation could deepen his separation from Charles and William beyond repair. But questioning her choices might threaten the marriage for which he had already surrendered duty, status, and much of his former life. Their public future was now trapped inside the same conflict. New projects would no longer be judged only by their quality. Every interview, partnership, and announcement could be examined through questions of credibility, motive, titles, and the royal identity they claimed to have escaped. The palace remained silent. It did not argue. It allowed ceremony, continuity, and time to answer for it. Bower did not need to destroy Meghan completely. He only needed to create enough doubt that every future account would be searched for missing pieces. Meghan wanted freedom without erasure. Harry wanted love without losing his family. The monarchy demanded loyalty without negotiation. And the true confrontation may still be ahead. Meghan could answer with revelations of her own, forcing the palace to decide whether silence remained protection or had become surrender. Bower, meanwhile, suggested that further material had not yet been published. Because behind the titles, accusations, and carefully managed appearances, one question now hangs over them all. When the next revelation arrives, Will Meghan strike back at the palace, or will Harry finally be forced to choose between his marriage and the family he left behind?